And we are super excited to have Kathy Chin joining us today. Kathy's been our long-serving treasurer at the Alternator. She's been with us since, well, for the last 6 years, and she's going to be leaving the board because her term is up. She can't serve more than 6 years with us. So we're extremely sad before she goes. We're sad for her to go, but we're gonna pick her brain of one last little time here to see if there's any tips that she can give us and answer any questions that we might have. I'd also like to just acknowledge before we get going that I'm coming to you from Silk Territory, which includes Kelowna, British Columbia. It's also where the Alternator is and where we present our work. So, and we are very thankful for that. All right, so without ado, I think because these things usually go pretty quickly, I'm gonna pass this over to Kathy to provide a bit more of a fulsome introduction of her experience with tax. And I think too, like, do keep the questions coming. I know I have some questions of my own, but this is really the time. If you have questions generally about tax, to have them ready. And please note, Kathy can speak generally, but she can't give any specific tax advice to you during this, and if that makes sense. So maybe Kathy,
elaborate on that a little more,
add a bit more context. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, for sure. Yes, that was maybe just a little disclaimer, just in case, you know, you've got your $5 million inheritance coming and you'd like to ask me how to best invest that from a tax effective way. I'm gonna just pass on that, guys. I'm not gonna give you specific advice that could potentially lose you money or that kind of thing. But I am happy to answer specific questions if you have for instance, can I deduct my dog as a dependent? I will have to tell you no. I'll be happy to answer specific things of that nature. So a little bit more about me. I'm fairly new to Kelowna, I guess. I've been here for about 7 years. It seems to have just flown by. And shortly after I moved here, I joined up with the Alternator because although I'm not an artist myself, I am an art lover and an art supporter. And so what I can do to support the arts is to volunteer my services as an accountant, which is often needed, although it's not the really exciting part of going to the gallery, I'm sure. Today, I'm hoping that everyone will feel free to ask questions. Like, there are no silly questions. Truly, there are none. So anything you have to ask, I'm happy to take a crack at it. And if I can't answer, I'll let you know. You can either put them in the chat, as Melanie said, or just interrupt me or put up your hand, ask directly. That's totally fine. I think we're a small enough group that, it's not going to get overwhelming. So just feel free to let it fly. I think what I'd like to do first, just to sort of get a feel for what everybody wants, is to maybe let me know how experienced you are in terms of your taxes. Like, have you ever filed your own tax return, for instance? Like, I'm just trying to figure out what level I need to talk at here. So if you've filed your own tax return, maybe put yes in the comments. We can just see. Whoop. Oh, we've got lots of yeses so far, which is great. A million years ago, that's fine. They haven't changed that much. It's good. Online, excellent. Husband, also good. Having an accountant, yes, also great. Yeah. And yeah, okay, that sounds good. So it seems as though everyone, has sort of had some experience anyway, which is great. So maybe you're going to be asking me more involved questions than I'm thinking, but I'm not sure. I think one thing maybe start off is most artists who file taxes, one of the questions or things that you have to ask yourself to begin with Oh, am I cutting out a little bit? I
A
just
very
got a
little bit.
notification. Yeah, okay. Just let me know though. Yeah. One question that I think people have is, how do I report my art business? And do I report my art business at all? Like, is anybody in the situation where they're not sure if they're even going to report their art business? I think that sometimes people are in between the stage where they're like maybe not a professional artist, but they do sell the odd thing here and there. And meanwhile, they're incurring costs because, supplies are expensive, that kind of stuff. If people, let's see, 1 or 2 years to know of no income. Yeah, this is an overview of just your life as an artist, I guess, and reporting. So if you have an art business, if you're making money, incurring expenses, you can absolutely report that on a tax return, even if you're having losses each year. At a certain point, you have to kind of balance that out and think to yourself, okay, why am I really doing this? Not as an artist, always do art, but like, why am I reporting it on my tax return? If it is truly more like a hobby, and you're really doing it for your own enjoyment as opposed to a business, then it's kind of, maybe something that a person has to think of for themselves. So a question just came out of whether to report if you have 1 or 2 years where you maybe didn't make art, or you were doing something else, or you don't have any income. What you can do is just keep that schedule in your tax return and say that it's not your final year of filing. There's a little tick box to say, is this your final year? And just say no, but you don't have to report anything if you truly didn't have any activity. That's okay. I think there was a question sort of up further.
Yeah,
I'll just take
was
a quick little
what can
scroll through here.
It was what can I deduct on
Are you looking
paintings that have been donated,
that you gifted? Right.
that have been gifted?
Okay.
Yeah,
You know
sorry.
what? I knew that this was going to come up. I knew this was going to come up because this is a very common one, and it's something that everyone, I'm sure, asks you for your donations of art, or appreciates definitely your donations of art. The wrinkle when you report it on your tax return is that you don't want to get in the situation where you double dip. And what I mean by that, if I can, maybe I'll share my screen now and just show you the business schedule. Here we go. Okay, so you can see my screen now, I think, right? Or no, not yet.
No.
Like that. Can we see it now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this screen, okay, lots of little boxes, but this screen really shows your expenses. So if you can see where my little cursor is going, you've got all your advertising, meals, bad debts, hopefully not very many of those, all the things that you need to spend in order to produce your art. And then up further, like on this line here, that would be your income, like your actual income. So for example, if you are filing your tax return, and let's just say you've got $100,000 in here, you've got your gross income, you've sold $100,000 worth of work, and then in here you've got your supplies, your rent, all that kind of stuff, your studio space rent, all those things. If you are going to deduct an amount that you paid for supplies, which you normally would, you're allowed to do that, right? Like your whatever type of art you produce, like the supplies that you need to produce that, you can deduct those right in here. If you are also going to claim a donation credit, like if you're going to donate some art, that recipient is going to give you a donation receipt that says, Melanie donated this work for $10,000 in kind. Like, that's how much her art was worth. If Melanie claims a credit for that, and she also deducts supplies expense, it's like she is double dipping. She's reducing her tax on this income that she's making, but she's also deducting the cost of the supplies. So that's a bit offside. Am I making that clear, or is that kind of fuzzy?
I think it's a bit fuzzy for me. So can you just, can you say that again? So if
Sure.
I was to donate a work to you, I would get the $10,000 income or whatever that is.
Yeah, I would give you a receipt. Like say somebody,
sorry.
say somebody donated to a work to the Alternator to sell, like, and said, okay, you know what, I could sell this for $450. Alternator, please give me a charitable donation receipt for $450.
Okay.
And we would happily, write that for you. But on the other hand, like on your tax return, if you're donating something that you are also taking deductions on, like if you're, let's see, this is not a perfect analogy, but an analogy would be, suppose I went to the liquor store and, okay, you have to just roll with me here. I'm just creating a scenario for us. I'm an artist, or I'm a drinker, and I've got a friend who works at the beer store. Okay.
Yeah.
So I go in there, I buy myself a 6-pack cans, and I'm a little bit short. And I say, friend, I'm going to return these cans to you. Can you just take that off my bill? Because I'm going to come back here, next week and give you the cans, and it will be square. So, okay, everyone with me so far on that. So I've reduced my expense there. I've kind of, got in a little bit extra, for the credit of the cans. Okay, so I go home with my cans happily. And then I realize, oh crap, I'm on meds. I can't drink this beer. And then I give the beer away to a friend. I give my beer to Melanie. I say, Melanie, you're a beer drinker. Here, have some beer. So Melanie drinks the beer happily, goes back to the store, gets credit for the cans. So suddenly the store is out. We've double dipped.
Okay.
I've gotten a break on my cost of the beer, and Melanie, like we've double claimed. I've claimed credit, and Melanie has also claimed credit. So we've kind of double dipped on this product. And granted, I'm sorry, guys, it's not a perfect analogy for deducting expenses and then also claiming a credit, but it's sort of close. I mean, like you can maybe kind of see, all right, I'm reducing my taxes by claiming these expenses for something I made. And then on top of it, I'm also claiming a credit for the same thing that I made. So it's
right. So we did have a follow-up question with regards to double dipping.
Okay.
Often the donated works were made years before the donation, so there's no way to figure out what the expenditures were. But shouldn't one also consider the value of the time and the creativity of the artist? And I actually had a follow-up to that in terms of like, I'm donating a piece of work to you that I'm saying is worth $1 million.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
But maybe so is there what kind of assessment criteria needs to go along with that? I know that you can get work authenticated. There's also things like blockchain and stuff that are coming along. I'm not sure what
I personally can't speak to blockchain, honestly. I find that, bends my head a little bit.
Okay.
Well, but for instance, like if for instance, we had a donation, I believe, of sometimes the alternator gets donations in kind. Like, for instance, if someone wanted to donate a computer to us or something like that, we would issue a donation receipt for the fair market value of that computer, what it would be worth on the market. Like it has a value that you can nail down. Art is harder because, as you guys all know, like the value can be subjective. If you're not an artist who's like almost like publicly traded, like there isn't a value like a black book that you can look up,
Well, that's kind of what blockchain is too, right? Just for reference for folks who aren't familiar, that's kind of the idea with blockchain. So take a look at that. But but yeah, they're looking for art appraisers, or is that
Yeah, I think that's definitely a way to go about it. And I'm definitely not saying that you can't donate your art and that you shouldn't claim a charitable donation receipt. I think it's just when, um, just for instance, like usually if you donate your time, like for instance, the time that I donate to the Alternator, I don't claim that on my tax return as something that would be legit, because it's not. and services is like, so services and goods in kind. So if someone donated a chair, for instance, like there is a value to that, and it doesn't, like you either have to choose not deducting the cost of it, or I'm
or
just
you
trying to find a
provide
better
like a
way to
receipt?
explain. Yeah. I mean, guys, I think there's no easy answer to this, I guess is what I'm saying. And we could probably talk about it, for another half an hour. If you are in this situation and you are having trouble knowing what to claim on your return, I think one of the keys is, did you get a donation receipt from the person that you donated to, and are they a registered charity?
Okay.
If you've donated it to somebody and they're not a registered charity, you couldn't claim it as a donation anyway.
And gifts are different.
So,
Gifts,
so that's, yeah. I mean, a gift to another person. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, sorry to, like, Evelyn, if this was your situation, like, and it wasn't like a donation per se, but it was like a gift to a friend or something like that. Or a gift to, like, say your friend opened a business and you thought, oh, you know what, I'm going to give them a painting. You know, absolutely, you can deduct the cost of that painting, the cost of your supplies, that kind of thing. You don't have to worry about that. What would be offside is if you said, you know what, my painting is worth $15,000 and I'm going to deduct that off my income. Like that's not legit. That's not okay to do.
okay. I'm going to move on to another question.
Yeah, okay.
Do you still encourage to report when you have 1 to 2 years of no income? And I know you
Yeah,
kind of talked about this. I know my
right.
first few years I had losses.
Yeah.
And I think that's,
Any business
I think
does, honestly.
most
Yeah.
people or small businesses, and I think
Hmm.
artists, especially in their early
Yeah.
years, are investing a lot in their practice. And
Yeah.
I'm definitely one of those folks. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's important. And then following that, does it make a difference if you have a GST number as an artist?
Yeah. The difference, well, their GST is one of those things that you can definitely voluntarily do, even if you're not at the $30,000 threshold. There's a $30,000 threshold after which you have to register for GST. Like if you don't, then you're offside. So if your sales are over $30,000 and you're not registered for GST, then you need to do it. If you're not at $30,000 and you don't want to register for GST, then that's okay. You don't have to. But there can be circumstances where you might want to. Like, for instance, suppose you're thinking, you know what, I'm not at 30,000 now, but I'd rather get my ducks in a row, register now, start filing, and then when I hit 30, I don't even have to worry about it. It'll just be part of my business routine. Um, the thing with GST is that you once you're registered, you have to keep going unless you deregister yourself because you don't need to do it anymore. So with GST, like you charge GST on your sales, but you also claim, they're called input tax credits. I don't know why they figured out such an unwieldy name for it, but basically it's getting back the GST that you pay for supplies. So suppose you buy your supplies at Opus, you save your receipts, you can see the GST amount that you paid. You keep track of that and you can claim that back from the government once when you file your GST return. So it can add up, and it can definitely be a help, not to to sort of know in your mind that, okay, you know what, my costs are not as high as I think, because I am going to get that little bit back,
I was always
that
under the
5%.
impression I was always under the impression that in order to claim a loss, you needed to have a
Mm.
GST number or like be a registered
Oh,
business. And is that
mm.
is that false?
Yeah,
Is
that's they're sort of unrelated. Your tax
okay.
return reports income tax. Your GST return reports just the GST. So they're really not related.
Hmm.
Yeah, the time where they interact is that if you are registered for GST and you are filing a GST return, the amounts that you put on your tax return have to have the GST taken out. Otherwise, you're double dipping again.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yes, Melanie, you don't have to have a GST return in order to have a business. No, I see a lot of people who don't have a GST number at all, and it's because for now their sales are under 30, and they don't want the extra hassle of all the administrative work of filing GST returns and keeping track of GST and that kind of stuff, because that can be a
Mhm.
pain in the butt, honestly, for people who don't really enjoy bookwork in the first place.
Um, so next question. I
Sure.
understand that small grants need to be reported as income. Does this
Yeah.
qualify as art income or personal income? And
Oh.
should one expect a T4 for each small grant?
Oh, okay. Um, that's a really good question, because I imagine it can be pretty confusing. So unless you are incorporated, which have a corporation to handle your art, your art income is your personal income. It's all mashed up together in a big tax party. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, hold on. I should have really made a dummy return with fake numbers in here, so it's more interesting, but I didn't. Okay, so can you see my screen now? This is just a blank 2020 tax return, and this form is called the jacket. It's the summary of everything that's in the return. So it'll have your name, social insurance number, all that stuff. All these nosy questions about Elections Canada and your foreign property. But this is the part I wanted to show you. This part's total income. If you have a T4, it would go up here. And we don't really need to look at all of the, oh, maybe I'll make it bigger. That might help us out. There are all these different kinds of income, depending on, various sources that you might have of income. And I guess my point here is that there are all these different kinds of income, but really they all add up together and come down to this total income. It's all in a big pot. So whether it's a grant, or if it's your art income, or if it's your T4, it all ends up in this big pot. So there's no difference. This schedule right here, self-employment income, business income, this is where you would report your art. So the schedule that we were looking at before with all the expenses, it feeds into this part, and it just becomes part of the big pot of income that you have at the
Sorry,
end of the year.
what about commission income? Like, what does
Yep.
that mean opposed to like if someone commissioned a painting or a piece of artwork? Would
Okay.
that
Yeah.
fit,
Yeah.
fit
I
in there?
think that the word commission, it really has two meanings in the sense of income. Like, for
Hmm.
instance, there is somebody at just to pull a name out of the air, like an electronics shop, like the Source or Andres or whatever.
Hmm.
They might be commissioned salespeople, but that and on their
Right.
T4 they would have an amount of commissioned income. But that's different from what you're saying.
Like a work,
Of
an
someone
artwork
commissioning.
commission.
Right. Right.
Perfect.
Yeah. Like so. There's no difference in the way you would report that. That would be just right into your art income.
Okay.
And to speak about grants, sometimes a grant does generate a slip, I believe, like if it's a bursary of some sort, or if it's, say, you got something from UBCO or, you know, something like that, they will often give a T4A slip, different from a T4, but still a slip that they would issue to you. And so it might go on a different schedule than your art income, but at the end of the day, it would all end up in this big pool. Yeah,
Okay.
so it all ends up in the same place. It's like they're like little streams going down to the, you know, big river.
Okay.
Does that answer your question about the grant income?
I think so.
Okay.
We'll just see if we have follow-up questions, just put them in the chat.
This question from Alice about supplies coming from overseas, was that about GST, Alice, or was that something different?
Partly about the GST and partly about how would I be able to deduct them from the income still?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it works the same way, luckily. If you keep track of your supplies and you like you're buying it online, but you probably get an email receipt of some kind,
Yeah.
you just use that. And if it usually they translate into Canadian dollars too. And if it's not translated into Canadian dollars, then you can translate it at yourself at the year end. That would be okay as well. But they all kind of go. Let's see. Should I share my screen again?
Sure.
It's well, Alice, have you used the tax return before and used the business schedule to report your income or your taxes? Okay. Yeah, the business schedule is the one that I had popped up before. Here, I'll share my screen. Is it useful to share my screen, you guys? Or is it kind of like, and just another generic form? kind of
No, I find it useful.
Yeah, okay, I'll share quickly and then we can go back. So, okay, how can you see it? Yeah, okay. So this is the business schedule. It looks very lengthy. In reality, there aren't really that many numbers to put in, but for some reason in the program, it just has reams and reams of scrolling. but you can see at the top, it says statement of business or professional activities. And then you would fill in your identification, that kind of thing. If you have a website, you would put it in as well at your own discretion, because I feel a bit like this is a bit of a fishing expedition on Canada Revenue Agency's part, you know, to help them stop people from selling things online without reporting it. So I think that they would like to keep track of that. Yeah. Anyway, so business income, you'd put your sales here, sales and commissions. And then scrolling down and scrolling and scrolling. This part is the next part. This is part 4. This is the next part I think that most people are quite interested in when they have a business, because it details the expenses that you're allowed to deduct. So for artists, I think, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not an artist, but one of the biggest expenses would be your supplies, right? So there's a line down here for office stationery and supplies. And I find, you know, it's probably not perfect. Like they're probably thinking of, you know, more like an officey person deducting things like cleaning supplies. But for you, you could put supplies here, or you could also put it up in this cost of goods sold and gross profit area. Yeah. I would put purchases during the year. Yeah, all of this is pretty detailed stuff I'm telling you, but I guess what I'm trying to say at the end of the day is that you can deduct your supplies, and so please do. I think sometimes people have small expenditures that they don't keep track of, or they don't realize that they can deduct these things, and yes, absolutely, you can. So it's not super critical where you put it, as long as you get it in there and reduce your income. We like paying tax, but only as much as we really should pay tax, right? We don't want to pay more than we need to.
I know a lot of artists are nowadays working from home.
Yep.
Is it possible to deduct home expenses at all?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I'm glad you asked that. There are a couple ways you can do this. So this year, because of COVID, there is, if you were, let's see, if you're an independent artist and you want to deduct home expenses, there is a place on this form where you can put those in. So if you keep scrolling and scrolling, or if you're using Simple Tax or something like that, there'll be like prompts on the screen to ask you for home expenses. But what it does, and the concept behind it is here. See this area where you've got total house area and business area? This would be, these two numbers are used to portion out or calculate a percentage of your total house expenses that you're allowed to claim. So for example, suppose you had 1,000 square foot apartment and you have a studio in there that's like 10 by 10, so like 100 square feet. You would put in like 1,000 and 100 square feet, and that works out to 10%. So in effect, what they're doing here is saying, okay, we recognize that you need some of your house area to do your business, and that's legit. We want to calculate the amount of overhead, if you will, that that you're allowed to deduct as a business expense. So, and the way they do that is with square feet. So I think depending on what kind of art you do, like for instance, you might have a studio space in your house, but you also might have like storage in the garage, right? Or, you know, something like that. So you can include all the space that you use for your business that's dedicated to your business here to calculate that percentage. And then underneath here, you see heat, electricity, insurance, maintenance, mortgage interest, property taxes. You would fill all of those amounts in here, and then it would total up, and you'd be able to calculate a percentage of that. That was your business expense.
Okay.
So that's an important one. Yeah. Yeah. Something that's not listed on here, for instance, would be rent. But that's absolutely still allowable. Not everybody owns their home. You know, not everybody has a mortgage interest. You would just enter it in under other expenses, rent or
Okay.
internet, right? You know, a lot of people, especially these days, are using internet to sell their art, are using it to, you know, sometimes create their art, right? So so all of those things.
We've had a few more questions that have come in.
Yep.
One more related to expenses to, can Adobe, Microsoft, and other software subscription fees be claimed under expenses?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, anything like that. You would put, let's see, I'm gonna do my irritating scrolling again. Kind of makes you car sick a little bit. I would put that under office expenses. You might not find a perfect category to claim things under, but absolutely things like that are essential to your business. You know, anything that's essential to your business that you use, you know, think about whether you can deduct that, whether it's a supply or if it's an office expense, or like even like you might want to take a course. Like suppose we charged for this today, like suppose we charged $10 for you guys to come. you could claim that as like an education expense, or, you know, professional training, something like that. Yeah, that's all legit. You know, sometimes you know, being in tax, I have seen people try to claim some pretty wacky things. But for the most part, you know, if you're thinking about your business and you think, you know what, I use, you know, 50 rolls of paper towel because I need to, yes, claim that. You know, if I, you know, have to buy particular software to manipulate my images that I'm creating, yes, absolutely. That's, or if I have to buy cords because or upgrade my internet, you know, that's legit. It's part of what is needed for the process, right? For your business.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then just to confirm, would
Mhm.
artist fees be listed under professional income?
Okay. I would put it all in the business schedule. Just because, and this is not meant to cast any aspersions on people's, practices or anything like that as being like not professional, because of course you're professionals, professional artists. But when we look at these schedules, I believe what Canada Revenue is thinking about when they think of a professional business is things like engineers, architects, lawyers, accountants, doctors, that kind of stuff. So, I think that, especially since you're selling goods, art usually, or services, that kind of business is generally best under the business schedule. It's funny how all the different words kind of like have these meanings sort of shift around, hey? So
Yeah.
yeah. Let's see, any other questions that we can pull from the chat? Are we?
Yeah, there's a couple more. So okay, so this is a question. How should I file my self-employed tax with the
Okay,
fact that I was doing some work for an individual, so
right.
design and administration, etc., and had an honorarium for exhibiting some work in galleries? Are there two
Okay.
different forms for self-employment that need to be filled out?
Okay. Yeah, I think again, we can put everything on the business schedule. You might have income streams that are slightly different from each other, but I think it also depends on your intent. Like for instance, if you are getting honoraria like on a regular basis and it's part of your part of your art business, like you've got the one part that does this and then another part that purely just produces and sells art, you might for your own tracking and your own knowledge of what's happening with yourself, you might want to keep those separate. You're not required to keep them separate for CRA though. Like for your tax return, this could all go on one business schedule. But if you, for your own purposes, want to keep track of it separately, you can. You can make two business schedules. That's totally fine. My caveat there, or my just thing, keep your heads up. If you make things too complicated for yourself, if you're not the kind of person who likes that kind of stuff, and I use the KISS principle, keep it simple. If you want to keep track of it separately, you can. But just keep in mind, it all goes into the same bucket at the end of the day. Like it's not going to make a difference in terms of your income, like your total income or your tax. It's all going into that same bucket. But if you, for your own purposes, say you want to say, okay, I don't know which I enjoy more. I'm doing these two different things, both art related but different. I'm going to give them both a year or two and then see how I'm doing. So suppose you do that and you keep track of them separately and you realize, oh, okay, well, I'm not making any money here and I'm killing it over here. It's useful sometimes for your own business and your own knowledge of your own business to see where you're doing the best from a financial standpoint anyway. You might not enjoy the one that's making a lot of money, but that's a different issue, right? But so to answer your question, it's kind of up to you. It technically, for with the law and all that kind of thing, doesn't matter. Put it all on the same schedule if that's the easiest. If you want to keep a track of it separately, it's up to
Okay. Keep the questions coming. I have a few more as well. Just thinking about going back to taxes and stuff too. So GST, and this is kind of a funny anecdote. So I have a work that I sold it was characterized as, because it was it was a book, but it was like a
Mm,
single edition, so it was kind of a sculpture at the same time.
yes.
Sculptures, you don't pay PST on,
Oh,
books you do. So
oh
it
my God.
actually changed how I was defining the work based
Yeah.
on the taxes and like claiming stuff. But can you talk a little bit, I guess, more generally about PST and what that means? And if you're selling
Hmm.
things in a different province,
Oh,
or
wow.
do you have to collect PST and what does that
Hmm.
mean? Or, you know, and
You
then
know,
as well,
yeah.
like looking internationally, if you have to collect
Ah,
GST, if you're selling things or
wow.
doing a residency or things
Those are
internationally.
great questions. I have to admit though, I'm an income tax person, so I'm
Okay.
not really equipped to talk about that very in depth
Okay.
or at all. I should
Okay.
probably not
No
get
worries.
myself in trouble. But no, those are great questions. One thing I can say is if you're selling something to somebody or you're doing services for somebody and they're located elsewhere, like in the world, that place that doesn't have GST, or like say Alberta, um, you wouldn't have to charge GST. Like, it's
Mhm.
taxable. I think the phrase or the defining factor is taxable supplies in Canada. And if it's not in Canada, then it doesn't apply. But I think, if you're going to do that, I definitely would get an opinion,
Okay.
um, just to check on it. Because I think one of the worst things is to get offside um, of the GST people.
Okay.
In particular, they seem to be more motivated to getcha than the other branches.
Got it.
For PST, that is so interesting, Melanie. I wouldn't have thought that characterizing your art differently would make a difference like that. Like that's kind of an interesting almost loophole,
I know. It actually
you
made
know?
me like, oh my goodness. Now I have to like, and then I had to
Yeah.
think about like the core of that work. Is it a book? Is it a sculpture? Is it a book? Is it a
Yeah.
sculpture? Oh my
Yeah.
God. Anyways. Um, and we have a question that came up from Andreas. Do you have
Hmm.
any recommendations for determining ideal RRSP contributions in order to
Oh.
cancel out potential tax repayment?
Hmm.
Is there a formula for comparing gross income and total expenses, for instance?
Okay. This one is more about tax brackets, I think, than anything else. Like if you could take the sort of fabricated example where you have income but no expenses, sort of like being just an employee. What I was saying before about every income stream just kind of going to the same bucket. That's really what we need to think about. Like, so if you are looking at your income and you're thinking, um, if you're thinking, okay, man, I don't want to pay any taxes this year, you you would look at your income and look at where you are in the income tax brackets. And okay, I'm going to show my screen again because just in case you guys are visual, you're a visual artist, right? Okay, I'm going to show my screen again. This is okay. So this is, I'm going to go back to that um, jacket, but farther down here we can see the tax brackets. Okay, so the way these work is that um, the more income you make, in that total income bucket or that taxable income bucket that we were looking at before, that bucket drives your tax rate. So, for example, if you're making less than $48,000, you're going to be in this bracket, the lowest bracket of 15%, and then plus another approximately 5% for BC. So, so you'd be in there. But suppose you were just barely in here. Like suppose you made like $52,000 and you got into this bracket instead. You can see that there's a 5% jump, which is pretty big, right? And you're thinking to yourself, I wish I hadn't made that extra $2,000, right? So what you can do is contribute enough to your RSP that you drop yourself back down into that bucket. So there isn't really per se like a magic formula to calculate, your total income versus your expenses, et cetera. But there is sort of like a chart. I mean, this, I guess we can see as a chart to show where you want to be. Or like, suppose, like I would love to be up here one day, good Lord. But I think that's the most, or one of the tools that you can use to plan for RSPs.
Yeah. Can I just thank you, Kathy? That's really helppful. And I just want to explain, like, I guess this is one of the negative aspects about working with an accountant for a few years, is I've stopped looking at the form, and it didn't occur to me to look at these brackets within the form. I was kind of like, where do you find the brackets?
Yeah, yes. Well, you know what? This they only started putting it on this form like maybe a couple years ago. Like before, it was a completely separate form. So so yes, this is like the magical form. And if you want to completely cancel out your tax, you you can sort of play around with your deductions. Let's see, I'll scroll up and show you. Where is it? Okay. So this has nothing to do with art, but it does have to do with your taxes. So I'll just show you quickly. Everybody gets tax credits. This one up at the top here, this is the personal tax credit amount for 2020 for everybody, for every taxpayer. Everybody gets this 13 grand. So suppose you really want to play with your income and you've got some money stashed away and you want to just not pay any tax at all. You can, if you drop your income down to this number, $13,000, this $13,000 will wipe out all your tax. I didn't explain that well. Tax credits are, how do you explain this? Tax credits are breaks that the government gives us as almost like incentives, or some of them are incentives, some of them are kind of basic income breaks. I keep saying the word breaks. I wish I could think of a better word. Exemptions, like they kind of recognize, okay, if someone is making less than that, they shouldn't pay any tax. And this is indexed, so it gets higher every year. For instance, if you have a spouse, you're supporting someone who is not making money, there would be another amount in here, and they're saying, okay, we recognize that you are supporting another person. I can claim one of my kids here because I'm a single parent. So, so this area of credits is our incentives, breaks, and exemptions that the government will give you to reduce your tax burden. And if you make less money than all of this added up together, you will owe zero tax. So, so if you really, really wanted to just kill it with your RSPs and just bomb your tax return, then that's what you would do. You would just reduce your tax down to your income down as far as you could. One of the things that is great about RSPs is that you can you have until March 1st to contribute. So if you are able to kind of look at that chart, figure out what your income was. Oh, I scrolled too far. Sorry. If you're able to figure out your self-employed income before the deadline to contribute to RSPs, you can see where you fall. Or if your employer is really nice and they give you your T4 step early, you can see where you fall. And you can figure out where or how much you might need to contribute. Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Andreas, did that help with your follow-up question as well?
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know if the follow-up question is super
Yeah.
pertinent in this context, but I was just wondering if I was transferring equities from a non-registered account into an RRSP, at what point are capital gains taxes applied to those transfers?
Yeah. Okay. At the moment of disposition, I would think. Yeah. Like I think you. So if you've got like your portfolio of protected investments in your RSP, and you've got your portfolio of non-protected investments, like it's almost like a sale. You could consider it to be a sale. So whenever there is an actual sale, then there's an actual disposition for tax purposes, and that's when the gain or loss would be calculated. Yeah. So so that's another one. Like if you have the ability to keep an eye on those for yourself, and you kind of can quantify in your mind how much that gain would be, that would be part of your income. But something nice to remember is that our capital gains in Canada are only taxed at 50%. So if you have a gain, you can divide that in half, and then that half is what will go into your income bucket.
Is that also true for US or foreign holdings?
If there are capital holdings, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I believe so. I think there are some distributions from other countries that kind of lose their character. So I would just have to be, you just have to be careful about that before you rely on only being taxed 50%. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So just a heads up, we have about 5 minutes left. So if you have any outstanding questions, please put them in the chat window now, and we'll make sure that we get to them. And we'll follow up here with a couple more. We'll skip to, Kathy, can you just confirm what the March 1st deadline is for that you mentioned a couple minutes ago?
March 1st deadline. Oh, it was for RRSP contributions.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that's the big day. It's on Monday this year. So you got some time to
That's a big day.
frantically
Yeah.
go through your stuff over the weekend. Yeah. And then I think there's another question about deadlines for T4s or T4As.
Yes, Andreas, it is well timed. We planned it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, get your calculator out, Andreas. T4s or T4As should be received by the end of February, or they need to be filed by the end of February by employers and payers. So you might not receive your T4 exactly on the 28th, but it should be shortly thereafter. Yeah. Yeah, if your employer is taking you know, until March or April to give you your T4, then they're offside. Yeah, so, and you have every right to ask for it. Maybe something I can note is that T4As, you know, for payments other than employment payments, sometimes people get these as, you know, honoraria or maybe bursaries or, you know, things like that. Sometimes organizations don't issue them. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. So it's kind of on the taxpayer to keep track of that. It doesn't seem fair, does it? But it's one of those things where I think it's just not widely standardized within businesses, you know, to issue a T4A or not. So I think if you've received some money and you haven't got a T4A, I would still report it, because I think one of the things that's important is that if Canada Revenue realizes that you haven't reported income, they can charge you a penalty, which, you know, and it kind of, they flag your account at Canada. I'm making it sound more scary than it needs to be probably, but they do. If you don't report income for whatever reason, you missed something, or it could be accidental, you know, they flag your account for 3 years. So the first year, they might not charge you a penalty, but the second year, if you do it again, they will charge you 10% federally and 10% provincially. So it ends up being like 20% of the unreported income. So it can really ding you. So just be careful, just be cognizant. Like if you think, oh, should I report this? Should I not? I would lean towards reporting it. Of course, I'm a non-risk taker. I'm a I'm a conservative accountant.
Mojan.
Kathy, does that apply for, say, like I've gotten honorariums before where I definitely have not done
Yeah.
that. Like, so
Yeah.
if it was from like 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Hey, this, I think it's one of those things. If it wasn't a large amount, like if you're the kind of person, you're not going to sleep tonight because you know this now, you might just you might get it, you might adjust at your tax return. But if it's more than 3 years ago, it's what's called statute barred. So they can't go past a certain amount of time, and unless they suspect fraud, which a missed slip is not going to be that big a deal. I feel like, oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I just want to say, Andreas put a helpful comment in there that for T4 and T4As, one can always cross-reference all income through the CRA portal. True.
Yes. Yes. I think right now there are some people in Canada who are having trouble accessing their accounts. Knock wood, I'm not one of them, but I have a client who is quite distressed that they can't access their account. But that's a really good point. If you sign up for my account at CRA, you can see tax slips not just from this year, but from prior years back to, I think, 2016. So it can be really useful, like if you're a bit behind in filing taxes, as many people are. Maybe that's the other thing I want to leave everyone with, that you're all obviously, somewhat interested in tax, so maybe you're not behind, but everybody knows someone who hasn't filed for years, and it's not the end of the world. It really isn't. There are lots of people who are in that boat.
Andreas also just added, you can also see your RSP and TFSA contribution limits as well.
Yes. No, I personally love CRA's site. I'm impressed with how much information they've put in there. It's a great tool. If you're the kind of person who likes to look at that kind of stuff and keep track of it, it's great. You can get your assessments on there too, or you can find out whether or not they received your tax return, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy. This was extremely helpful. I really appreciate you taking the time, and yeah, I guess if anyone else has any other questions about taxes, are there any other resources or places that you would point people to?
Yeah, I would I feel like such a, I'm working for the man, but I would recommend CRA's website. If you haven't signed up for my account, it truly is useful. And I'm not sure. I know that I can do this as a tax professional, but I can actually submit documents on people's behalf to CRA. And I think you can do that as well through my account. So for instance, if you were having a problem, you could submit questions that way. The phone lines are terrible, but I think in a last ditch situation, get yourself a glass of wine and phone the CRA.
That's 6 pack of beer.
Yes, yeah, that's right. If you have a question, they can answer it for you, but just be prepared to wait. I would say, yeah, Google is also your friend. Like sometimes there are be careful, of course, sometimes there are crappy articles online that are not true, but CRA is a good resource, for most things, especially medical expenses. We didn't talk about that at all today, but there's a great list of allowable medical expenses that is easy to access and super helpful. Or other things like that, what to do on immigration, or your question, Melanie, that was stumping me about when you're working in another country. There's a lot of information about that as well, like
Well,
or at least numbers to call.
Yeah, and that's just dreaming. I don't know next time I'm leaving the country, so. But
after all this COVID stuff goes away. Yes.
Well, thank you so much. And if anyone has questions for the alternator, we can be reached at info@alternatorcenter.com. And we thank everyone for joining us for our final alternator chat of the season. It's been a pleasure.
The alternator chats have been so cool. I wish I would have attended a couple more.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad to see them go. There's been a lot of folks who've joined us for quite a few of these. And I really appreciate like the new folks that we've met, the new members of the alternator community and new volunteers that have come out of this. And yeah, it's